So over the last few months, we've had some excellent discussions with the SLN webinars on what is happening across the snow leopard range, and we'll continue to do that. But today we're taking a brief moment to provide a different kind of forum related to different scientific themes that are important to snow leopards. So without any ado, I'm going to pass it over to Sandro, who has so kindly agreed to facilitate today's session and share with us more. So over to you, Sandro.
Hello everybody. I'll be very quick and then I leave the floor to Francesco. I'd like just to make a quick remark about the relatively poor number of studies on meso and large carnivores focused on a multi-species approach. Well, there are some mainly done through camera traps, but they don't go much beyond activity rhythms, whereas it's much more interesting to look at how they coexist by dividing their prey items and habitats and so on. After all, since the Pleistocene, maybe even the Pliocene in some cases, no carnivore has evolved on its own. But they have always been in close relationship with the prey and other predators. Therefore, it's difficult to reach an understanding of the coevolution of extant and extinct species, but we should rather try to clarify the relationships between extant species at least. Because exactly as it happens to us, if we live in a countryside on our house, then we behave in a different way than if we are in a condominiums together with many other people. So to focus some research on the relationships, on the way of coexistence of different large carnivores together is very stimulating, I think. And Francesco has been doing that partly in the field, but mainly looking at publications. And recently he has published a review in the journal Mammal Review. Some of you may have seen it. And well, he is an associate professor at Siena University. He got his present position the day when I retired. And I am very glad for that, because he's a former student of mine and he has been working closely with me. And now I am working closely with him. We have shifted roles. Started his career working on ungulates, but then moved also to include the large carnivores, especially the wolf. And in the last few slides of his talk, he will be telling you about the results of a study area close to Siena, where wolves arrived recolonized this place some years ago, and now they are in full swing. Well, I think I'm said enough, and now I leave the floor to Francesco. Francesco, please.
Thank you, Sandro, very much for your kind introduction. Good morning to everybody. And first of all, of course, I wish to thank Justin, Raki, and Sandro for the invitation to give this talk and for the relevant organization. As Sandro said, I've been working mainly on ungulates, but I had the great opportunity of visiting the snow leopard habitat some years ago during the last periods of Sandro's long-term research in Nepal. So I'm really happy and honored to be here and talk also about snow leopard issues in this context. I will do it starting from a research perspective, summarizing the main results of work which has been partly published, as Sandro said, and partly still unpublished, conducted together with Sandro and colleagues of from universities of Durham, Newcastle, and Bahia Blanca, dealing with relationships between carnivore food habits and prey richness. And I'll try to discuss the results from the perspective of the ecology and conservation of the snow leopard, and eventually making a parallel with an ongoing study of the wolf, as Sandro said. Well, we all know that large carnivores are large, of course, and this body size related definition implies some fundamental implications from both the energetic and ecological points of view, because these carnivores tend to prefer large prey, as all carnivore experts know, and as very kindly energetic models also confirmed, because the relationship between the densities of predator and prey tends to be stronger for larger predators than it is for smaller ones, strongly suggesting that large predators depend on large prey. Another key aspect of the ecology of large carnivores is that they usually tend not to love their neighbors, because interspecific killing is very widespread among these animals. It has been reported in about 100 pairs of species. Interspecific killing is the most extreme form of interspecific competition, and it has been reported also to affect population dynamics of smaller competitors. Usually larger carnivores are dominant over smaller ones, and interference has been suggested to be more frequent between carnivores which share more their diet, so ecologically similar to some extent. A fundamental implication of all this, which has been nicely reviewed by several papers, especially these two reviews by Palomares and Caro and Donadio and Balsky, published both of them in on the Medical Naturalist. Oh, sorry. So fundamental implication is that usually smaller carnivores tend to avoid contact with larger ones. For example, partitioning their ecological niche along one or more axes, for example, diet or time or simply space. But you can see that even this aspect, which is competition, is strongly related to food habits, to what carnivores eat. So large prey is definitely a key determinant of ecology of large predators. Thus, we asked this question, how does the variation of local prey richness among different areas where carnivores live influence the food habits of predators? And in particular, we consider the diet breadth, that is the extent of the realized prey spectrum of carnivores. Ecological and evolutionary theories suggest two alternative predictions. For example, if a rich prey community is present, one can expect that carnivores have the opportunity to select the most profitable prey, which would lead to a narrow diet breadth. Conversely, one may also expect that if there are many species of prey available, carnivores can be more generalist, that is, taking prey when they encounter them, thus leading to a broad diet breadth. We tested these two alternative predictions, in particular to answer to this question. Does the diet breadth grow with growing local prey richness? We considered the large terrestrial mammalian predators, that is, predators which, from an energetic point of view, are expected to be more dependent on large prey, large vertebrates. We selected 12 study species, in particular large felids from tiger, lion, leopards, and so on, large canids, and spotted hyena, of course, including also the snow leopard, definitely. we could not include the clouded leopard because not sufficient data are available to derive a conclusion from publications. We didn't consider the striped hyena and the brown hyena because they are mainly scavengers, so their food habits are expected not to be influenced by predation, by predatory habits. And we didn't consider ursids because most of them are mainly omnivores, or at least include as important food items, vegetables or invertebrates, so it would have been inappropriate to consider them. And as Sandro said, we collated data from papers, from literature, considering studies where absolute or relative frequencies of occurrence of different prey were reported. And where also we could assess the potential prey spectrum, that is, which species of large prey, potential large prey were available. Then for each study, we estimated two indices of diet breadth. First of all, we considered the total diet breadth, the total diet, by using the well-known Levin's index. Then, since large carnivores base their food habits, especially on large prey, we focused on large prey. So we considered this different index, the number of frequently used large prey, that is prey used with a frequency greater than 5%, and we called it large prey index. We calculated these two indices for each study, and for each carnivore separately, we modeled them against the number of local large prey species available, controlling for sample size and sample type, that is whether the study was conducted through kills or scats. Okay, if you have questions about all this, we can discuss later on, or you can send me an email and we can discuss about it if you are interested more. So, does the diet breadth increase with growing prey richness, growing local prey richness? Okay, for 7 species, the answer is yes. Tiger, lion, spotted hyena, jaguar, puma, wolf, and Eurasian lynx, although for this last species, results should be taken with great caution because the number of studies was limited. I show here just a couple of panels because we have to show some 14 panels, which is too much. I summarize results by showing the lion and the tiger. You see that for both these carnivores, the total diet breadth for the large prey index tend to show greater values in areas where the number of local large prey species was greater than in areas with a relatively poorer prey community. But results were not consistent across all carnivore species because for 3 species, this leopard, cheetah, and African wild dog, we observed no support for a variation in the diet breadth indices across study areas with different local prey richness. For other 2 species, is the dog and the snow leopard, we not only observed no increase of the diet breadth, but also observed a trend to a possible decrease of the number of frequently used large prey with growing prey richness. But I will come back to this later on, especially concerning the snow leopard, of course. So we asked why these patterns were were inconsistent across all carnivores. So there was not a general pattern across all the species. We asked why. So the 7 carnivores which showed an increase of diet breadth with prey richness include the 5 largest predators considered. So a first obvious explanation that we thought about is that body size plays a role. The largest carnivores have the opportunity of expanding their diet breadth in prey-richer communities, also including smaller species. Smaller carnivores may not have this opportunity. However, when we regressed the relationship between diet breadth and prey richness against predator body mass, we found only a weak, not significant relationship, which strongly suggests that there must be something more than body mass per se, only body mass in influencing this relationship. These 7 species are usually dominant carnivores in their guild, because also the wolf or the Eurasian lynx are usually the top predators in the study areas from which the data were obtained. And dominant carnivores would be expected to show, to encounter a little competition when looking for prey. They should be expected to have a relatively free access to prey. Of course, they also face a competition, definitely, but it should be expected to be much less intense than the one which is suffered from, by smaller carnivores such as leopard, cheetah, or African wild dog, for which we could expect that the food habits and the diet breadth would be limited by dominant predators. This explanation received some support by further analysis which we have done, considering a carnivore, the leopard, which has a very broad distribution range encompassing 2 continents with areas holding very different and diverse predator and prey communities, because in Africa, the leopard often coexists with 2 larger gregarious competitors, such as the lion and the spotted hyena, and with many smaller ones, including also a gregarious competitor, that is the African wild dog. Whereas in Asia, the leopard coexists with 1 larger solitary competitor, the tiger, and several smaller ones. So we would expect that competition be stronger in Africa than in Asia for this fact. So should we expect the same result when we, if we consider separately the leopard in Asia from the leopard in Africa? So we split the data set, analyzing the data separately for these 2 continents. And we obtained clearly different results, because in Africa, we still observed no support for a variation of the diet breadth and the large prey index across study areas with different levels of prey richness. Whereas in Asia, the diet breadth tend to be greater in sites with a greater prey richness. So in this case, the leopard seems to behave more as a dominant carnivore in Asia, more as a subordinate one in Africa. What about the snow leopard? Okay, we observed no trend, no increase, sorry, of the diet breadth in areas with a greater prey richness in respect to areas with a lower prey richness. But also we found an apparent trend to a supported trend to a decrease of the number of frequently used large prey, along with greater increasing prey richness. Also, you can see that the number of frequently used large prey is very low, ranging from 1 to 3. They are usually barrel or ibex or lion tar, where it is present, livestock. But the realized diet breadth of this large cat is very narrow, the narrowest one among all Asiatic carnivores. This large cat is adapted to live in marginal areas, hardly accessible, with low productivity, and usually with a low or very low prey density, where it is specialized, seems to be specialized to prey on medium-sized ungulates living that kind of habitat. One may suggest that it has been pushed there from competition with more dominant carnivores, such as the wolf or the leopard, or also the tiger. And if so, this apparent reduction of the diet breadth, this no increase of diet breadth in areas which are expected to hold not only more prey, but also more predators, may be the result of greater selectivity or also greater partitioning, need of partitioning prey in areas where the potential for competition may be also higher. Well, caution is required in the interpretation of these results because, as Sandro said, sample size is limited in terms of studies, but also in terms of sample size within studies, because about half of the considered studies in this review were based on several tens of scats, less than 50 scats, which is not a small number, considering this, that studying a snow leopard in Central Asia is not as studying a wolf in Central Italy. I'm aware of this. I'm just saying that more information is required to come. So, results support that large dominant predators, suggest that large dominant predators have a broader diet breadth and showed an increase of diet breadth with growing prey richness, whereas smaller subordinate ones didn't show this trend. So, if the diet of smaller subordinate competitors or predators is limited by presence of larger or superior competitors, then we would expect that prey depletion would lead to an increase of overlap in diet between carnivores, because larger predators would be expected to expand their diet breadth, overlapping to smaller carnivores, determining a greater potential for competition. If so, it is true that adequate prey diversity is important for the largest predators. By using the same words of Carbon, Pettorelli, and Stephens, the bigger they are, the harder they fall if prey is depleted. But it is fundamental also for subordinate, relatively smaller carnivores to limit the potential for competition with larger ones. So, considering the potential competitors of the snow leopard, that is the wolf, the leopard, the common leopard, and the tiger in Asia, they, or in Eurasia, in the case of the wolf, then appear to behave as dominant in terms of relationship between diet breadth and local prey richness. So, whereas the snow leopard does not show the same trend. But what happens when the snow leopard occurs in sympathy with potential competitors? Here, information is even more scanty, actually. Several papers are available for the wolf-snow leopard relationship. For example, Chetri and co-authors, working in a couple of areas in central Nepal, and Bocci and co-authors working in Pakistan, observed quite different results. The first study was conducted in very prey-rich areas, whereas the second one was conducted in a prey-poorer area. And the diet overlap between these two carnivores was very different because it was narrow, low, in the prey-rich area, and was much more substantial in the prey-poor area, indicating a potential for competition here, and supporting our previous conclusion that a greater prey richness is expected to favor partitioning between the prey partitioning between the snow leopard and potential competitors. Other studies conducted in other areas encompassing very, very broad study systems, very large, study systems, but based on some relatively small sample size, found still very high levels of dietary overlap, ranging between 82 to 91%. So, suggesting a great potential for competition between these two carnivores. The other example I can mention, of course, is the one relevant to the common leopard and the snow leopard. Mentioning the study led by Sandro Lovari in Sagarmatha National Park, where these two large cats cats coexist with two large wild prey, the Himalayan tahr and musk deer, and with livestock, for example, this yak. In this area, the barral and the marmot are not present. I mention also the marmot because you know that it is a substantial prey for the snow leopard, which is not occurring here. So the prey spectrum is quite narrow for these two carnivores. And after several decades of just occasional presence, the snow leopard started breeding in the area since 2003. Then it started breeding especially Himalayan tahr, and as Sandro nicely showed, the tahr numbers sharply decreased after the arrival of snow leopard as a breeding species, and this decrease was then followed by the decrease of snow leopard. Snow leopard, which could not switch their predation to an alternative prey because an alternative wild prey was not really present in its habitat. In fact, when we looked at this paper, we looked at the altitude, the elevation of the sites where sightings of Himalayan tahr were collected during standardized itineraries to count them. And year after year, the elevation of sites used by tahr decreased, whereas the altitude of the core area of snow leopards determined through genotyped scats remained at the same altitude, which means that they support that tahr numbers decreased in the snow leopard habitats, whereas the snow leopard did not follow its main prey to lower altitude where the common leopard occurs. Because in this other paper, authors showed that dietary overlap between these two felids was also seasonally substantial, approaching almost 80% in some parts of the year, strongly supporting a role of competition in limiting, in this case, the snow leopard. So, alternative prey is important. It's important, for example, to buffer the effects of predator that, of the impact that a predator can have on its main prey. When we think about impact, we think usually in terms of numerical impact. The predator arrives to an area, starts preying on its main prey. If the system is relatively simple, we may expect an effect on prey numbers if the system is simple. But can impacts go beyond effects on population size? Are there other impacts which can have effects on predators, but not related to prey numbers? To explain it, I will do a sort of parallel with the study case that Sandro mentioned, relevant to the wolf and its prey in a study area in Italy. I know that wolf is not a snow leopard, Italy is not Central Asia, it's not Himalayas, I know. But either in Italy or in the Himalayas, prey tend to avoid predators. So to some extent, some parallel may be done. We see. And this study area, 90 kilometers square, includes mainly Mediterranean forest with the dense scrub wood and some part of agricultural landscape, where the density of potential prey for the wolf is very high. It includes the wild boar, which you all know, the fallow deer, which is a medium-sized deer species. The adult males can weigh even more than 100 kilograms, but average body size of females is much smaller. This is a roe deer, the other species, small to medium-sized deer. In this area, adult males approach 30 kilograms of weight, just to give you an idea of the body size. And the density of all these three ungulates pulled together is between 25 and 30 individuals per kilometer square in summer after birth, which is very high. Apart from these wild ungulates, also livestock is present, especially a couple of sheep herds and sort of feral cattle, although they are relatively less accessible to wolves because of several reasons too long to explain, but essentially related to the management of this kind of livestock. A pack of wolves established in the area 5 years ago, a second pack formed up a couple of years later. Now we are probably documenting a third pack, so wolf population is doing well. We started studying food habits and spatiotemporal relationships and other stuff. And considering the first 2 years of presence of wolf in the area, the main selected prey was the fallow deer. This is the volume, percentage volume in diet. You see that the diet of wolves were based largely on wild boar and fallow deer, which together built up more than 75% of diet, with other prey being less important, in particular livestock being very, very not important. Yes, not really important. And when we compared the relative use of this prey with their relative availability, estimated through standardized pellet group counts, we observed that the fallow deer was used more than its availability, so it was selected. We also studied spatiotemporal relationships through standardized camera traps. I don't go in details of methods, of course. So if you are interested, you can ask. We observed that the main prey, wild boar and fallow deer, did not avoid wolves especially because their passage rate, their frequency of capture rate didn't differ, or was in the case of wild boar even greater in sites highly used by wolves than in sites less used by wolves. So no support for spatial avoidance of wolf by the prey. Of course, we looked at temporal activity patterns. The wolf and the wild boar showed strictly nocturnal or crepuscular activity. Here is the activity profile with peaks at night, at dawn, and dusk maybe for the wolf. Sample size here is the number of detections used for the analysis throughout 1 year of study. You see that also the wild boar has a low level of activity during the day and a peak at dusk, showing a substantial temporal overlap with the wolf, indicating that the wolf matches its activity. Wild boar, probably. Whereas the fallow deer, the main prey of the wolf at that time, showed a relatively more constant activity during the day with some peaks, but not a clear pattern. In fact, activity patterns were not significantly different from homogeneity. Then we compared this pattern between sites highly used or less used by wolves. And we observed that in sites highly used by wolves, fallow deer tended to be diurnal. So there is a peak of activity during the middle of the day and low levels of activity during some parts of the night. Whereas in sites less used by wolves, fallow deer were much more nocturnal with peaks at dusk and also during the night, strongly suggesting an avoidance on a temporal basis. Moreover, we repeated the study 1 year after, and we observed that the diurnal activity of fallow deer still increased. So data suggests that there was an avoidance, a temporal avoidance of the predator by the main prey after the wolf arrival. Because when we compare this data with data collected through radio tracking 20 years ago, when the wolf didn't occur in the area, fallow deer at that time were especially nocturnal or active at dawn and dusk. So this shift is expected to be determined by the wolf. What about the dynamics of prey populations, estimated through pellet group counts? Here I only show the estimated density with no mention to the confidence intervals to improve the readability of the figure. But you can see that the fallow deer, the green line, was really stable throughout the last years. There was no numerical decrease of the fallow deer. Wild boar decreased, but some other data we have strongly indicates a significant relationship between this decrease and the levels of culling, which is implemented by park authorities to limit wild boar impacts on components of biological diversity and agriculture. And the roe deer also is on the decrease. So there was no decrease of the main selected prey after the wolf arrival. What about the potential changes in the diet of wolves? After the first 2 years, when the fallow deer was likely the most used prey, you see that the use of fallow deer has decreased. Okay, this figure shows the percentage in diet of the wild boar, fallow deer, roe deer, and livestock. You see that there is a constant reliance of wolves on these two species, wild boar and fallow deer, but their relevant proportions in the diet changed throughout the study, with the wild boar becoming the local main prey instead of fallow deer. So there was not an impact by the wolf on the numbers of its main prey, but there was probably an impact on the behavior of its main prey, which led to lower accessibility of fallow deer to wolves, which kept on being nocturnal and started using mainly the wild boar, which is a good prey for wolves, a very good prey, because in Italy, many study areas of Italy, the wild boar is the main prey of wolves. Okay, so you see an example of the importance of alternative prey in this case, also for the local persistence of the wolf, which has not started also to prey much on livestock, because an alternative prey was available in this case. So to summarize, we have seen that large prey and competition are key determinants of ecology, conservation of large carnivores, and that alternative prey is very important because it is expected to limit competition between smaller and larger predators, can help preventing livestock depredation if livestock is properly managed, and ultimately it can favor carnivore persistence. What about snow leopard, to conclude? We have seen that snow leopard has a very narrow diet breadth, the narrowest one among all the Asiatic large carnivores. It relies on a very limited, low numbers of medium-sized ungulates living its habitat, with a possible role of competition in influencing its food habits. But it must say that information, most of these aspects, is still limited, especially concerning food habits in relation to prey availability, prey density, which is difficult to estimate, but some methods such as double observer counts, or wherever possible, also camera traps may help in this respect. Also to evaluate other aspects of predator-prey relationships, including also potential behavioral interactions, and also interactions with competitors. So to conclude, more information is needed, and the era of field studies of food habits is probably not over. So I thank you for your attention. I leave the floor to Sandro.
Well, the era of field studies is not over. Definitely is not over. You can't do everything from satellites and from computers. One has still to go to the field and collect data. This may seem an obvious remark, but it is not, because if you look at the past and you look at what happens now, I think you can see that in the past, many more people were going to the field with continuity and always in the same areas, collecting data on a regular basis. That is, they were doing scientific research, because just by visiting an area and picking up some data is not really going very deep in finding out. And this is especially important now in these years because of the climatic change. The climatic change is going to upset most of our knowledge in a few decades, because especially on mountains, because in strongly seasonal habitats, a change in climate will mean that plant associations, vegetation will change aspect or will move to higher elevations. Then herbivores will have to move together with the food they want. So you can expect altitudinal movements and also movements at the same altitude, but going to different aspects of herbivores. If herbivores move around, then the carnivores will have to adapt. And this is already happening. We know that it is already happening. Therefore, the earlier the attention of researchers will be focused mainly on prey-predator and the predator-predator relationships, the better it will be. Because the overall ecological picture, most likely, but well, I say most likely just because it is not very scientific to say that something will happen. We don't know exactly, but most likely there will be a change in the overall ecological picture as long as the climatic change is moving on. So, well, now I think it's time for questions. We have some 20 minutes available. Just ask whatever comes to your mind relevant to this talk, of course. Thank you.
Thank you. And Sandro, I'm going to stop sharing your screen if that's okay, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
So that we can see you. There you go.
So has anyone any question?
There's one question from Gustav, Sandro, in the chat. I don't know if you want to ask him to share it with the mic because it's very long.
No, I hadn't seen it, sorry.
Well, maybe I can just you know, say it by words instead. And I was very fascinating. You know, you started off by saying that you could either expect them to increase their diet breadth or decrease it. And if you increase your diet breadth with more number of prey, then you're behaving more generalistic. And, you know, I've been sort of learned, you know, cats, they're specialists. So it was very neat to see that a lot of these large cats actually increase the diet breadth. And that, does that mean that they are more generalistic then? And then I was thinking, in that case, the species that did not increase their diet breadth, like the dhole and the snow leopard, are they more specialist, or do you think that it's the dominance that makes them or prevents them from increasing the diet breadth? And if it wasn't such a strong competition from the others, would the dhole and the snow leopard maybe also increase their diet breadth if those dominant species were not there? I know there's a lot of questions, but I'm very fascinating that they behave more generalistic, I thought, but maybe I misunderstood that a bit.
Yes, I understand your point. I can tell that if you look at the common leopard, it seems to behave differently in Africa in respect to Asia. And the most important difference between these two continents is the different prey and also different predator communities, which would go into the direction of role of competition in structuring the action of food habits of these, at least these species. As to the dole, I didn't show the figure, but the pattern showed by the dole is exactly the opposite as the one showed by the tiger. And they usually coexist in the study areas from which data were obtained. So in areas with a greater diversity of prey, the tiger has a broader diet breadth and the dole has a narrower one. And it is the opposite in the areas with the lower prey diversity. And most of the study sites from which data on the on the dole were obtained included also the tiger. So I think it strongly suggests a role of competition in this figure. As to the snow leopard, yes, analysis so far showed that that negative trend of the diet breadth of growing prey richness. I think that more studies would be needed to support it, because the relationship was supported from the statistics, but was not very strong. What's impressive, at least to me, is that the diet breadth is very, very narrow. So the number of prey used is very, very low. Even in areas with 7 or 8 potential prey, they use just 1 or 2. So this is clearly a specialist. I don't know whether I answered to all of your questions.
Thank you. Very interesting. Thank you.
So Justin asked for snow leopard, based on this research, how would you predict these changes in the number of prey species influence the risk of livestock depredation? Could more prey species present reduce the risk of depredation risk? Good question. I'm facing the same problem with the wolf here. I think that the more wild prey are available, the better it is, provided that livestock is properly managed. Otherwise, they would be expected to support an abundant population of the carnivore, and sooner or later, livestock depredation will increase if livestock is not properly managed, whenever possible, of course. I think that these two parts of the story should be considered together. That is the availability of an adequate spectrum of prey, and this prey should be more accessible, easier than livestock. Otherwise, why should a predator prefer them to more accessible sheep or cattle, for example? So I think that both these aspects should go together.
And what about if increases wild prey, even if there's not a diversity of wild prey, the numbers of snow leopards, for example, will increase, right? Potentially, which could lead to more depredation. So like, what about that kind of relationship as well? Because with more prey, there might be more snow leopards in an area. Like, we don't really know the carrying capacity, right, of an area based on prey. So yeah, so I don't know if that's just another question.
Are you asking whether it's more important the number of prey or the diversity of prey?
Yes, so could the diversity of prey help, even if number of snow leopards increase potentially in that kind of situation as a buffer as well?
Yeah, because it provides them with an alternative. Yeah. Yes, but apart from it, I think that if the livestock is still available and easily accessible, it's also it's going to determine also a greater number, and also support a greater number of predators with a sort of feedback also on the predation. Okay. Another question by Royer. Would you mind to remind us the title of the review from which you show the relationship graphs between diet breadth and prey richness at the beginning of your talk?
From
yes,
Flo
Rodriguez. Yes. I'm not sharing the screen, so I can write the Okay. Okay. Can you see it?
Yeah.
Sorry. Only the largest terrestrial carnivores increase their dietary breadth with increasing prey richness. I can send the PDF. If you send me an email, I can send the PDF. Okay, I don't know whether I can interrupt the sharing of screen. I don't know whether there are other questions. Diet breadth changes with season. Oh, there are still other questions before. Sorry, Zalmai Mohev. I'm sorry if my pronunciation of names is wrong. Uriel has been reflected least in the literature, if at all, no leopard prey species, although Uriel is sympathetic to ibex. If I remember correctly, Uriel very rarely was included among the frequently used prey in this review, because even when it was used, it was used with a very, very low frequency of occurrence, maybe because of a different habitat selection in respect to the ibex, which is more, let's say, syntopic to the snow leopard.
So here, first I would like to thank you for the nice presentation. It was very nice and informative. In Wakhan National Park, I've been working in Wakhan National Park like for 5 years now. We have ibex, Uriel, and livestock down in the valley, and also in the other part we have argali, like Marco Polo sheep. Marco Polo have been reported as a diet or a prey species for snow leopard, but Uriel is reflected very least, if at all. So why is not snow leopard preying on Uriel? Or so what is the case? I mean, we do have ibex, we do have Uriel. So if snow leopard pass the Uriel area and come to the livestock, they prey on livestock but not on Uriel, or if it's not reported at all, I don't know. So
it may depend on how accessible is the livestock in respect to the Uriel in this area, whether they are kept in some fenced areas or some closed enclosures or so on, whether they are accessible or not, or more accessible than Uriel to the snow leopard. I think so. I don't know the area, but I can imagine this kind of explanation. Sandro has something more to
well, no, just that prevention of predation works very well to decrease predation in most cases. So if you have a huge flock of sheep and natural groups of wild sheep in respect to domestic sheep, and the domestic sheep is not defended in any way, by special management systems using really good shepherd dogs, not just dogs, but appropriate shepherd dogs, or fences, or some way, I mean, to create a problem to the predator. So if the domestic prey becomes a difficult prey more than the wild prey, then you could expect the predator go to the wild prey. But if it is, if the domestic prey is easily available, it will probably select the domestic one, also because it's more clustered than the wild one. You see? But I'm not familiar with your study area, so I'm speaking of something I don't know in person. You know?
Yeah, it was a bit surprising for me that, okay, although Oriole is in the snow leopard range, but it hasn't been really reflected in the literature as a main prey species for snow leopard. But its cousin, which is the Marco Polo sheep. Marco Polo is also a sheep, a wild sheep, and Oriole is also wild sheep. Marco Polo have been reflected or reported as a prey species, a main prey species, but not Oriole. That was a question for me, actually. Yeah.
You don't think that Marco Polo sheep are more abundant in the snow leopard range in respect to the Oriole?
That could be the case. That could be the case.
So it could be a matter of availability.
Mm-hmm. Thanks.
Another related question to the livestock issue is the one by Ariana Norris, Alaina Norris. You keep mentioning proper management. What do you think are some good methods of management? I saw that your wolf work is being done in the Marima region, so I'm guessing use of guard dogs is one approach. It's very difficult to generalize. Also, in the same area, different farms should be forced to adopt different strategies according to the very, very local situations of the farm. Proper livestock guarding dogs may be suitable in some areas, maybe not suitable in others, where, for example, livestock is widespread over very, very large areas. Also, fences or enclosures may be suitable in some areas or not suitable in others. So it's difficult to generalize, but usually I think that the best methods are those who physically protect livestock, at least during the moments of the day or the year when predation is more likely to occur, which does not mean that they are easy to be adopted. I'm aware of this.
It's a question
Another question. Yes, I'm reading the questions in order. There is Muhammad Basim asking whether diet breath changes with season. Very good question. It would have been very nice to analyze diet breath changes across season. It may be a step for future work. If there will be studies available for longer time periods, allowing to do some analysis separately from seasons, because especially for the snow leopard, many cases studies were based on samples collected over short time period, which didn't allow a seasonal analysis. So it would be interesting to analyze results and the data temporal basis. I could expect that the diet breath would be narrower during winter because, for example, marmots may be not available, or maybe because livestock may be not available in some areas because they could be protected in some enclosures. So diet breath may be reduced because of this, but it should be tested. Raza Mohammad asked whether we are conserving wild prey in our project areas and increases numbers, but still the predation cases in that areas increases. Why this happen? Okay, I think we could give the same answer we gave before. It depends on the way the livestock is managed, whether and the numbers, of course, of wild prey. They are increasing as a growth, but depends on whether they are more or less available and accessible to the predator than livestock. For example, in Maremma, we have seen that overall the density of wolf prey is slightly decreasing if we put together all the species, but 3 species, and one of them is being stable, and overall the density is very high, even if it is on the decrease. We are talking about some 25 ungulates per kilometer square, which is very, very high density. Also for the wolf. I'm talking about the wolf, because many areas where the wolf lives, prey density is much lower. Orion Johansson asked, we still do not have a good knowledge of snow leopard hunting techniques, but it appears as possible that they utilize slopes to facilitate catching prey. Do you think that differing hunting techniques between snow leopards, common leopards, and wolf could explain the spatial separation between the species, and if prey selection is more similar in study areas with more similar habitats? Oh, very good question. Yeah, I think that the strategy of predators depends on the prey. So the predator would be expected to adapt its hunting strategy to the prey and to avoid, in this case, the encounters with competitors. So yes, it may be an effect of partitioning. So to partition their diet, they develop suitable hunting techniques. It may help explain it. Yes, I think so.
Well, the difference between snow leopards and common leopards, as far as I could say, is mainly related to the habitat, but the behavior is very similar and very different from the wolves, as far as I know, because the snow leopard tends to use rocks and crevices. I mean, whatever heights it can find to approach the prey in its habitat, in its open habitat, whereas the common leopard does more or less the same, but using vegetation. So I do not expect that one species should be inhibited by moving to the other habitat just because of the hunting system. The wolf is somewhat a special case because it's an animal with great learning capabilities, and they can, I mean, they have a flexible hunting habits. So again, I would expect the wolf to be an efficient predator in most habitats. Otherwise, it will not have such a huge distribution range from Kamchatka to Alaska, passing through all the boreal part of the world.
Okay, and here's another question by Chloe Rodriguez. Along the variation in diet, have you looked at the variation of space use between the competing carnivores you reviewed? Like, are the lesser competitors forced to range more, or does nothing really change for them as the prey dishes increases? Because if diet overlap increases, one would expect more segregation at other levels. It's true. It would be nice to do this other work. What we know from some African studies, some studies conducted in Africa, is that subordinate carnivores tend to stay in areas in the, I can say, if you buffer between the areas used by lion prides, for example. It's the case of cheetah, but it would be another work. This one. It's a very good suggestion, a very good point, but we didn't do it at the moment. Claudio Augugliaro. Hello, I was wondering, is in the analysis the prey accessibility considered? I mean, snow leopard habitat is not easily occupied by many species. I guess the common leopard has a more accessible habitat for prey. So apparently, the prey richness in terms of diversity could be the same for snow leopard and common leopard, but accessibility to prey be different. That is, high prey richness in snow leopard areas could occupy more open areas not much used by snow leopard. Could the accessibility of prey to prey be determinant in terms of diet breadth? Okay. All the analyses were conducted separately for each carnivore. So all studies conducted, all the analysis conducted for the snow leopards included only the snow leopard as a carnivore. So sorry, for each carnivore was done a single analysis. I don't know whether I was clear saying. So all study areas from which snow leopard data were collated included both more and less accessible habitat. It is true that prey living in more plain habitats can be included in the snow leopard range, but it may be more accessible to competitors, which may explain why the snow leopard tend not to use them so much, for example. Where the prey selection has been assessed, for example, by Chetri and co-authors, it was shown that leopards tend to select especially prey living on cliff and rugged areas, for example, barrel. Your point is true, although it's difficult to consider it in a review. I don't know how to explain it better. No, I think there are no more questions.
Yeah, we're almost a bit over time. Actually, it's been a great discussion. I don't know if Sandro and Francesco, you guys have any last words you want to share with everyone before we end?
Well, of course, we want to thank you very much, everybody, for their patience, their questions.
Especially, yes.
There have been stimulating questions.
Yes, definitely.
And at long last, I have seen in person Orion Johansson. I've read a lot of your papers, and I always wondered what face you had.
Thank you.
Because
yeah.
it never occurred we met together. I know that you went to Gran Paradiso once. No, it was a collaborator of yours, I think.
Me and Gustav, yes.
Yeah, to check about darting of ibexes. I think.
Yep, correct.
But I was not there. It was one of the few times when I was not there. I was told.
Yeah, it was great.
Compliments for your work, because it has really been a very interesting work. And I especially liked the papers which was published in Ecosphere, the one comparing cougars and snow leopards. I think it was a great paper, and well, I mean, really provocative. I really liked it, and Gustav was also one of the co-authors.
Thank you. Nice, very nice to meet you too. Finally.
Ciao.
Thank you very
And
much.
thank you to Justin, of course, our guest.
Yeah. Thank you, Sandro. Thank you, Francesco, and thanks everyone for the really stimulating discussion and stimulating review. I think you reminded us to go beyond one species, the snow leopard, and thinking it within its system. So I hope we have more of these reflections as we continue with our country updates and further webinars. I'm really excited to see how, the country updates, they kind of interact with this kind of science-focused discussions, both in terms of understanding what needs to be done in terms of research, but also in terms of conservation. So thank you so much, Francesco, for being on the Snow Leopard Network Committee the last 3 years. We've really enjoyed your contribution to the Snow Leopard Network. So thank you, Sandro. And it was really great to meet you, Francesco, and sharing the recent research, unpublished and published, and bringing it all together for us. It was a very clear and thorough presentation. I really enjoyed it. And I think many members will put it on our website for our other members. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much for inviting me and for hosting this webinar. It was very, very interesting to me also, and also for all the questions, stimulating questions you all asked. Thank you.
Thank you. And in the future, we hope to have other scientists, maybe Oriana and Gustav will come and share about their collared work with a science focus. And maybe Zalmai will share a little bit about the Afghanistan or other country updates from Afghanistan will come. I think we planned in the first half of next year to have an Afghanistan update. So we do have a lot of exciting webinars coming. So we look forward to them. So thank you everyone for continuing to join these conversations.
Bye-bye. Ciao.
Bye-bye, everyone. Ciao.